Welcome back to Steel City Roundtable. I am Mark Kneebone, one of your hosts, and my co-host is the awesome
Natalie Snyder.
Look, it's even a picture of her. It's crazy, right? How you guys doing today? So, another day, another week, another dollar. How was your week?
It was good. It was a lot. Christmas, not a lot of running around, but just a lot.
Oh, I mean, holidays, man. Holidays are always a lot, right? Like, holidays are just run. You know, nobody gets along the whole time. We talked about it on our last episode. So, yeah. But, I mean, did Santa bring you something cool?
He did. I got an awesome new pair of shoes that I love. I love shoes. They make me happy. And I got an angry star.
All right, Imelda Malcos.
I like my shoes. What can I say? And they're not boots. They're actual shoes.
But no, good time with the kids, good time with the family.
Good time with the family. Spent time with my mom. She wasn't feeling well over Christmas, so we went down there after dinner. So kind of laid back, but was a lot of fun and just enjoyed it. And didn't take very many pictures because I've realized I've spent most of my life not being part of things because I'm trying to take pictures of everything. So I tried to make the conscious decision and live with it about a year ago that, you know, if I don't get that many pictures of things, that's great. I'd rather have the memories.
So did you face any of the traumas that we talked about in our last episode, or did it go pretty smooth?
It went pretty smooth. Had a quote unquote family birthday party for my oldest yesterday, which for us is almost nobody that's biological family and is just close family friends. So that was anxiety inducing, you know, people in your house, clean, but they're people that know us that have been there 100 times, but it's still, for me, is just one of those triggers that has me all like wound really tight.
Did they see the dirt on the floor?
When I know that these are not the people that care, but there's something just ingrained in here, you know, and then it's like, well, I didn't have this and I didn't get a sandwich tray and I was just doing like munch. Is that and it was all that comes down to with the holidays with this. Was I enough? Did I do enough?
And of course you did. You know, I mean,
everybody seemed happy, but it's that, can you shut that little part off of your brain that's constantly making you wonder?
He's kind of like,
am I enough?
That guy.
Yes. Or what was my word last week? Curmudgeon.
Curmudgeon, yeah. So
cross between the Grinch and Eeyore.
So basically, all in all,
a success. How about you?
Great. I mean, we got done with the podcast. We went shopping. And she asked me 25 times what I wanted to eat for dinner. And I was like, I don't know, because there's nothing at the stores. So we ended up making a big ham and mashed potatoes and green bean casserole and just chilling with the dogs. And then on Christmas, went up to see my sister and my nephew. They live about an hour and a half away. So I got to see them, which was good, which is a great segue. It takes us right into what I want to talk about today.
Okay, let's go.
So we've done, Kelly and I did a show on here about family dynamics, family relationships, shit like that, like when we first started. And we didn't know what the fuck we were talking about. So being that was just a holiday, I would like to talk about family dynamics with focusing kind of around the idea of marriage, divorce, stepkids, stepfamilies.
Oh, the easy, fun, lighthearted stuff. Okay.
Yes, because that's what we do here. Like I went to the bank today, segue. We went to the bank today and we sat down with the guy that he watches a podcast. And I was like, so what do you think of it? He's like, well, it's really not my wheelhouse. He's like, kind of dark. I'm like, well, I mean, there's a ton of podcasts out here. If you want to go watch somebody just talk about shit and make people laugh all day long, that's fine.
We'll just make you laugh at our weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, this is, in essence, this is like our version of a support network. You know what I mean?
Well, and like one of our things is we talk about the things that people don't want to.
Yeah, and so like family is a difficult thing to talk about, and us coming from two different backgrounds, like me from the addiction, mental health aspect, you from like, having kids. I don't have kids, right? So, and everybody's happy about that. But, no kids, I have dogs and a girlfriend. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You have a house, you have a business, you're doing all these things that are different. So we have two different takes. 100% different ends. Granted, we both have mental health issues. In like, I hate saying mental health issues. Sidebar. I hate saying that, but that's what it is. It's not a disorder. It's not a disease. We're not inflicted.
But it's not, well, right, but
so what's the
issues, word? I don't know. I I've seen a lot of things, of course, on social media like everybody else has. I'm a big fan. I think you've heard me say this before, but it only seems to fall into the like ADHD category of like neurospicy and because it's just issues sounds like a problem.
It sounds like a problem, but it's like with PTSD. They changed PTSD from a disorder to like some other thing now. They don't call it PTSD as much. They call it like
Is it a syndrome now?
yeah, I think it's a syndrome. But what the fuck are you supposed to call it? Mushy grape? I mean, like, do I have a mushy grape? Do I have a oblong grape?
Sounds like a personal problem.
No. Ooh.
Sorry about that.
Wow. Off the belt. Thank you. But yeah, like, what the fuck do you call it? Because I mean, this isn't what I was planning on. But I mean, this is an important
one
thing.
person that doesn't have some type of mental health issue.
So just say poor mental health, because I don't have poor mental health. Like I had bad mental health before, but I don't have poor mental health because I'm working on it and it's getting better. So, even saying poor or good mental health is like a black or white. It's either poor or it's good. I have mediocre mental health. Like nobody's gonna say that.
Brain differences? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Seriously, please, Steel City Roundtable at gmail.com.
Please give us something.
Tell us what we're supposed to call this, because this is bothering me. Like, I want to know what the fuck I'm supposed to call it.
Because it immediately sounds negative.
Yes. I mean.
And I hate that part because I no longer look at my brain differences, whatever you want to call it, as a negative or as an issue. And that's something that we talked about last week. Like, let them all. I don't know. I don't have the brain flu. I mean, sometimes I do. But
yeah, I mean, and you don't say MHMR because they automatically put you in a different category.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like now it's like you've got some drastic issue. Are we on the spectrum? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
here?
probably. I mean, me.
Okay, so for all intended purposes, we will say mental health issue for right now.
Until you guys give us.
Until you tell us something different, it'd be nice. We'll give a little bit of background. So why don't you talk about, we talked about it in the last episode, but give like a little synopsis of what your nuclear family was like.
My nuclear family, mom, dad, older brother, had extended family. I came along late, so a lot of my extended family either had passed away or began to just as I was 4, 5, 6 years old. But that's my, growing up, that was my nuclear family. My parents were married until the day my father died. I guess they're technically still married, but stayed married despite the fact that I often kind of
it would make cuddling
thought they shouldn't. Pardon?
Make cuddling a little hard.
Wait, or awkward.
Both.
Okay.
Hard and awkward.
Oh, and chilly.
Yes,
chilly too. All right.
So you basically had a very, let's say, cookie cutter.
Very typical
family.
Looking. Dad worked, mom stayed home. Very typical looking family.
Okay. My family was a little different. My nuclear family changed by the year. It started off me, my sister, my father, my mother. They got divorced when I was like 4 years old, so it was my mother, my sister, and me. Then she remarried, so it was my mother, my sister, me, my stepdad, my stepbrother, my stepsister. Then they got divorced. In the meantime, my biological father remarried, and I had a stepsister, stepmother, stepsister. Then you come back to my family. My mom divorces my stepdad, and it's just me and my sister, because we kind of I lost touch with everybody else. Now I talk to my stepfather, I talk to my sister, I talk to my nephew. That is my family now. Anybody else that's involved, sorry to say, you're just not important enough to make the list. And bottom line is you didn't fill up your part of the bargain, so you can kiss my ass. Wow, that was nice. I'm a dick. So back to it. So let's fast forward to what your family is now. Your nuclear family is?
My nuclear family right now, and we'll backtrack from here, is me, my husband, 2 daughters, a dog, 2 cats, some chickens, fish, because they're part of the family too. Mm-hmm. My mom's still around, and I have a brother that I don't have a lot of contact with. Not because of any particular reason, we just don't. Mm-hmm. But there's, that's the people that live in my household are the 4 of us, and the animals. If you go back a little ways, when I met my husband, he was a single father, raising 3 daughters. His Their mother, his estranged wife, was elsewhere. He was sole caretaker. So when we got married, I went from 0 kids to 3 kids.
Okay.
And I became the evil stepmom.
Okay. Well, just so you folks know, Natalie and I have known each other about 3 months, so I am taking notes because I'm learning stuff for the first time. And that's the way I like it. That's the way I like it. Anyway, back to the track. So
let's not say.
So you've kind of, okay, so you already talked, we're right on the track of stepmom, step stuff. What was it like to be a stepmom to 3 daughters, and how old were they when you came in the picture?
They ranged from 8 to 13.
Okay.
When I came in the picture.
So what was it like in a house where there was a shit ton of estrogen and not much testosterone?
It was all over the place. It was very difficult for me because it wasn't the typical situation where the other parent is still in the picture and they're bouncing back and forth. They were completely gone.
Probably better off. Because you don't have that outside influence turning them against you. They're just...
Well, there were aspects that still existed, just not from the other parent. It was difficult because the oldest of the 3 girls that were my stepdaughters now was only 13 years younger than me. That's the age difference between us. So I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never parented, and now I'm, to some extent, stepping into a role parenting kids. I knew for the couple years before we got married, but hadn't been around them the way I've been around my biological children forever. Assuming, as a logical assumption, that there's got to be some kind of difficulty, trauma, something that mom's gone. There has to be. Whether it's good or bad, there's a reaction there. So I don't know how to navigate that.
Unless they're sociopaths.
Right. I don't know how to navigate that. So it was difficult. It was awkward. It was a learning curve. I thought that we got along well. I apparently was completely wrong in how things ended up. So I do not have any contact with any of them at this point at all. And my daughters, who knew combinations of them in babyhood, I made the decision that I did not want my girls to have contact with their half-sisters.
So what kind of stress does that cause in a marriage?
Internally, for me, a lot. Wondering what role I played or didn't play or should have played. Insert all the stuff here. Not an easy thing to talk about. So the default was just, well, we don't. There were difficulties in the process of everybody, of the older ones leaving and moving out on their own because they were approaching adulthood. It's not like they got booted at 12 years old.
Yeah.
And things that were like, well, we probably should, but this is sucky and it's awkward and we don't want to talk about it in front of, a portion of the older kids that were still there and not the younger one. And so it was a stressor that clearly existed, but was the big pink elephant in the room.
So is it kind of like this is that thing that we don't talk about that we just understand is a pain in the ass?
Is kind of what it morphed into. Now, keep in mind, my husband was still a police officer when I became a stepmom to 3. Mm-hmm. And he worked 8 at night till 4 in the morning. I had to get up at 5:36 to get ready for court.
Talk about torture.
So inevitably, when things happen with teenage kids, it happens after midnight.
So
it was tough. I looked at it, not because I was trying to convince myself, but I had some health issues when I was younger, and my doctor said, you probably will never be able to have kids. So I was like, well, okay, God managed to work this out, so I can still have kids. You don't have to birth kids for them to be your kids. So, okay, this is how this is going to happen for me. So I was like, okay, cool. Long term, it was not.
Well, I mean,
what was happening?
Step families, like I said, you heard the list of people that are quote unquote step siblings and step parents to me. Out of all those, the only ones I talk to are my stepfather, the one that raised me from the time I was 4 until whenever. My sister, my nephew, one of 3 nephews and a niece. I only talk to one nephew. I don't talk to my mother. I really don't talk to anybody in my family because the ones that I liked are dead, and the ones that I don't like are still alive. So, for me, it's better to stay out of the picture with those individuals. But so we're coming from 2 different angles. I was a stepchild, and you being a step parent. Some of the things that I noticed as a kid were when you have a third-party parent.
I like that so much better than step parent.
They're fucked from the beginning. They're absolutely fucked from the beginning. Because when a step parent comes into the scenario, they are the black sheep. They are the stranger. They are the unknown. They are now whatever's going on in that family. They are now the enemy for everyone. Everybody except for the person that marries them, because they love them and they marry them because they care about them and blah, 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 blah. But the kids now have a central focus point. So say you bring in 2 kids to a marriage and he has none. Well, those 2 kids that are yours, he's the common enemy.
There's a built-in automatic divide that can't be gotten around.
Yeah. Now, in my family, it was 2 from each parent. So, luckily my stepfather was awesome. So this was different for us. Like, we loved him to death. We still love him to death. Like, we had our moments where it was like, let's be dickheads, right? Let's cause problems.
Well, kids do.
But overall, my step siblings hated my mom. And we liked our stepfather. So, because we now liked our stepfather, guess who the common enemy was?
Mom.
The stepkids.
Oh.
So then it became a big dynamic in our family where the 2 sets of kids did not meet eye to eye ever, and we constantly fought. So it's kind of weird. And the reason why I'm explaining all this is because the way I see step parenting as almost like a battlefield. You've got the father's a general, you've got the mother's a general, and they're trying to get a truce, but now you got all these people throwing added scenarios and added issues in that relight the fire and continue the battle.
Because it's a built-in divide and conquer. Like,
it's horrible. I mean, it's a no-win situation for a step parent. I think it takes a very special person, a very selfless person, to come into a marriage as a step parent and to be able to win the children over from the other parent. And I don't mean win them over as like manipulate them. I mean, but like show them that they're a good person and actually win that child's affection. I was lucky my stepfather, I love him to death. Like, he's the reason why I'm not in jail. He's the reason why I'm not dead. Period, end of story, point blank. So, fast forward, he married my mom when I was like 5 or 6. They got divorced when I was 17. Fast forward, I'm 50. And I still talk to him and I don't talk to my own mother. Because I have respect for him, because as I've become older, he's been like my friend. You know what I mean? It's no longer a parent-child relationship because, stepchildren, once they leave the home, there really is unless they're adopted and take on your last name, there's really no responsibility for that step-parent for that child. You know what I mean? Like, once I turned 18, he could have turned his back on me and said, fuck you, I don't care about you, go away. Instead, it was the complete opposite. He's always been there for me when everybody else wasn't. So, you being a step parent, getting on that idea of like being, basically behind the 8 ball from the beginning. How do you attack that? How did you attack that?
I could only try to do and be what I thought was right. I clearly was not their mom. That was not my role. But at the same time, I was still one of the adults in the household. But what I can say is, as far as being a third-party parent, I really do like that. I was a complete and epic failure. Because if I wasn't...
You still talk to them today?
Then I would still talk to them.
Now, that was your first experience parenting, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about a double whammy? Like, not only it's your first time being a parent, it's your first time being a parent to children that aren't yours, who already have it out for you from the get-go.
It was an adventure.
Wow. Whatever their dates of birth are, I want to play those numbers in the lottery because that shit's got to hit sometime because that's just nothing but bad luck.
Oh, it hit like a bulldozer.
Oh my God, that's nothing but fucking bad luck.
Well, and it was, I will say, one of the things that makes me laugh about the whole thing is there was a period in time in which I was looking at colleges, high schools, and daycare because I was pregnant with our first.
No thanks.
All at the same time.
Yeah, no thanks. That's not for me.
And I never referred to them as my stepchildren. They were my children, my kids, because for me, it wasn't that I wanted that role. It was, I didn't think another line of demarcation of separation was necessary.
Well, like in my family, my stepfather was Doug for the longest time. And over time, he became Dad. Mm-hmm. Because just like everything else, it's like buying a new pair of shoes. Like, you got to try it on for a little while. You got to wear them around the house before you get comfortable enough to wear them out in public. You know, for us, it was like we had to, there comes a point, I think, in those step relationships, the healthy ones, in like a stepfather, stepmother, all that stuff. There comes a point where something breaks, and in a good way. Like the defenses break for the child and for the parent. More for the child, I think. You know, the child starts to no longer associate them as replacing the parent that's not there, and they start thinking about it as, this is my other father or my other mother.
And I think that's the right and good place to be where you guys got. I feel like in my blended situation, we worked backwards. I think we started out a lot better. Mm-hmm. And I think we were a lot closer. And as life happened and age happened, I think, and then when we started having mutual kids of our own, I don't know exactly. I mean, any number of things happened, and there was just a lot of difficulty, but I think we started better than we ended, clearly, because had we not, there wouldn't have been an end. And that's very difficult for me because I truly love them. I always will. Not because I'm super special or anything like that, but because they were a huge part of my life. They were my first kids. And I think that, you know, I look at how you talk about your stepdad, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I was hoping for, and that did not at all work out. And that's a more difficult thing for me to handle than walking into the minefield was.
Yeah, I think that's not something you can plan for as a parent or for a kid. Like, you can't put it on your calendar that, like, hey, I'm going to win these kids over and they're going to call me dad or they're going to call me mom and we're going to have the best relationship ever. Like, that's just not reality. You know, I think, you know, if I was in that situation, and like I said before, thank God I don't have any kids because that would be a disaster. But I think walking into the situation, if you're a step parent or a step kid, it's just, the goal is just to be open. You know, you don't have to, don't come into there with preconceived notions. Don't come in there with preconceived opinions that I'm not going to like this person, or I'm going to like this person, or I'm going to make their life hell, because the step parent is struggling just as much as the kids are. The only difference is that the step parents understands the feelings they're going through and the kids don't. Mm-hmm. You know, the younger the kids are, I was like I said, first, I was like 5 years old. Like, I don't understand what the hell's going on. My sister was 8. Like, she had a little bit better idea, but still, we're kids. You know, our brains are still soft and they're not formed well enough, and we're still dumb. You know, and I think the key in those relationships is to just maintain an open door policy, maintain an open mind, and just give each other a chance. You know, me personally, I never did that. I didn't. The only person I gave a chance was my stepfather. My stepmother to my biological father and her kids, like, I never gave them a chance. You know, I've had a little bit of contact with them in like maybe twice in 20 years, but like, they're not part of my life. So, I mean, I think step parenting, it's a difficult thing. Like, and it's so common now. It's so common now that kids see a divorce before they hit the end of high school.
Very.
Because marriage anymore, I don't think it's a business. I don't think anybody thinks of marriage as what it's supposed to be, or at least for the most part. I think people think of marriage as a step in a relationship, and marriage used to be like, this is a commitment for my lifetime, where I commit to this person in this relationship. Now it's like, oh, if I don't like it, I can just get divorced.
I think that people already have, not everyone, but a lot of people already have an eye toward divorce when they get married.
I did when I got married. 100% 100%. I mean, you know, Steve, I love you. You should have spoke up. But when I got married, it was, I was going to therapy before we got married with her, like a couple years before we got married. And honestly, when we got married, it was like one of those things where like I wanted to get married, but at the time I didn't know why. I just was like, hey, I want to get married. Like, did I want to get married because I loved her and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her? Or did I want to get married because I want to have a ring on my finger? Or did I want to get married for the security of the relationship of having that person?
The rite of passage aspect. Like, this is just what comes next.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to get married at some point in their lifetime. I mean, granted, but I was always like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just get divorced. And then I got divorced. So hey, watch what you wish for. But going back to families with stepkids, like, what did you find was the hardest hurdle for you? Because you said you started off good and it got worse. Mm-hmm. Like, do you remember a point where things started to transition? And if you don't want to talk about it, just say, fuck you, I don't want to talk about it.
I remember, in hindsight, like it is with everything, hindsight's 20/20. I sometimes wish we could see ahead and then go back. I think that it came, I don't know when the falling apart started. I know that my contribution to the overwhelm, and where I can admittedly, though I feel like crap about it, when I had my first child, that is a very different experience. Mm-hmm. Add to it, as you guys are aware, there was trauma with my oldest daughter's birth. So I think that was a little bit of the beginning of my disconnect, I think, from my stepkids. Not as an intentional thing, but because there's only so much of me, and literally for one child's life, I just had to devote more time, effort, energy to that. So I think that was a bit of my separation. And then, there is the human aspect that none of us, as moms, dads, stepmoms, stepdads, stepkids, whatever, there's only a finite amount of us. There's only so much you can give. And so in you're human, you're fully, absolutely human. And so when it's like, well, it's really hard to repeatedly choose to put my hand back on the hot stove and deal with difficult things and things that suck when I could be playing blocks with another kid.
Well, I mean, when you have a child of your own, quote unquote, I'm sure, there's some element of jealousy from the stepkids. Like, now she's spending all her time with the baby, and like they start to, and everybody knows I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a therapist, I have no idea what I'm talking about.
But we make it sound good.
Yeah, but I think there's an element of jealousy in that child that you've been raising, the stepkids, now see this baby as a threat because now it takes away from their time and their emotional support. And it's like you said, there's only so much of you to go around. Like, you can't, how much more can you cut yourself up into pieces to give to everybody?
Well, and for me, on a very personal level, it became very much of resentment, because a big part of the reason why I left the DA's office, where I loved working, was so that we were more financially stable without my husband having to stay on the police force. So went to a job to provide additional financial stability for and they were a big part of the reason, because I wanted them to be able to go to different schools, college was coming up, etc. So to then have that essentially be for nothing and nobody cared and was a rampant, in some aspects with portions of the combination of the kids, just the thankless end. And sometimes as a human being, it's like, well, wait, I was repaid like this. I left a job I love to make things better for all of us, and then it ends up being I got shit on. And I'm sure that they, I would think that any human being would inherently be reactive to having less time, attention, etc. I think that's only human, unless you're a complete sociopath, and I don't believe that my stepkids are. So there's no way that they couldn't have some reaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, it's impossible not to have a human reaction. You know, I mean, if you don't react, like you said, sociopath, narcissist, like then you just don't give a shit. But yeah, so like I said in the beginning, our relationships, like our histories are so different. You know, like, you know, you fast forward to now, and you know you're married, 2 kids. You don't talk to the stepkids. I talk to my stepdad, but that's it. And then I've become closer with you know, since I got sober, I've become closer with my sister and my nephew. So let's fast forward. How much do your kids know? Your daughters? How much do they know of the step siblings?
They had my oldest had a good amount of exposure. The youngest of them was still at home when I was pregnant and subsequently had the youngest. The youngest of the stepkids was at home for this birth of my second daughter. And the oldest was the one that really didn't lose contact until about, at this point, I think about a year and a half ago, lost full contact. But not lost. I know that I've attempted. I presume that I've been blocked because I get no responses. But I used to at least get, you know, happy birthday, Merry Christmas. And so, you know, my oldest daughter had established a relationship with her youngest half-sister. When things started going poorly in that aspect, my oldest daughter knows, and she has voiced her displeasure with me because I would not allow contact between the two of them because I did not feel that it was in my daughter's best interests. The other aspect is my girls are fiercely protective of me, and they know that these people don't like me. They've asked me why, and quite honestly, I can give them some reasons why I think it might be, but nobody ever said, none of them said to me, here's what you did that pissed me off.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know.
So I can't answer it, but I've taken the blame with my oldest, be like, no, because she'll say, well, I never heard from her. She said she'd be in contact. I said, that's on me because you're my child and I won't.
You know, we're all nobody's innocent in everything, right? Like, so, you know, I'm sure there were things said and done on your part. There are things said and done on their part. You know, it takes two to destroy a relationship, just like it takes two to make a relationship work. You know, I think it's a lot easier to destroy one, but.
Oh, absolutely.
So, lost my train of thought here. That happens a lot. So I was talking earlier about my nephew, and you know, this is something I really want to talk about. Like before the end of the show, is how much of a shitbag his dad is, and what those kids are going through with their divorce. So you didn't divorce, of course, you didn't divorce your husband.
Correct.
How do you think divorces in situations like this, whether it's stepkids in the relationship or if it's just biological kids, what do you think are some of the things that, you know, people face when it comes to divorces and traumas and the adjustments that you've seen from the criminal justice side?
Take that piece by piece. I think that there's always going to be an impact on kids from divorce. But I think that there are times where actually that could be a positive impact. I think if people are staying together and you have one, particularly if you have one parent that is extraordinarily unhappy, even if they try to hide it or try to keep up appearances, make things look good, that the kids will potentially be affected by that and living through that. So I think that, you know, there is a line of thought that, and I'm not sure where my personal feelings on this fall. There's a school of thought of, well, they're better off with the unhappy parent, you know, no longer being in the situation where they're unhappy and they're, you know, but I think people look at it like a crystal ball and now all of a sudden everybody's happy. Well, there's still impacts, there's still effects, there's still, you know, it wasn't in my situation when my husband and I got married, but there's still the kids bouncing back and forth. Or, you know, I'm one of those people that believes it's actually the parents that should have to move back and forth and not the kids. The kids should have one home and the parents, that's my personal, no, I've never tried to make that work because I'm still married. But what I definitely see from a professional perspective, that was hard to say, is a lot of people that I see and a lot of people that I defend come from non-two-parent homes. I don't like the phrase broken homes because sometimes they weren't broken. That's just the way they came into existence. And I've also seen some great success stories where, you have a single mom, the father's not around, there was not a divorce, dad was just never around, and they have people in their family, be it an uncle or mom's boss or mom's best friend or somebody that's a good male influence. I think that whether it's through divorce or non-existence, that the only way you can balance out potential trauma is by keeping things balanced for the kids, that they have enough exposure to people that care about them, to both male, female, however you want to look at it, influences, because people think differently. But I think that there's no way that anybody can say, well, my kids weren't impacted because I never talked negative about their father. I never talked that's a foolish thing to say, because kids are automatically going to be impacted when things change. And there's no way that divorce doesn't cause change.
Well, I mean, you brought up a good point. I mean, like you said, not calling it a broken family, but there's also a lot of families that have two parents, but just one of them is not good for the relationship, not good for the kid. You may have, and these are just examples, you may have a father that's, doesn't work, or a father that deals drugs, or a father that has a criminal background, the length of my foot. It could be any number of things that makes that parent not really qualified to be a good influence on the child. And I think that's something, like in law enforcement, that's something I saw more than anything, was I would see, go to homes where, one of the parents didn't work, the other one busted their ass, so there was a lot of animosity and a lot of fighting all the time when they came home, and then the kids are caught in the middle because they have nowhere to go. They live in a small one-bedroom apartment, and then tempers flare, and then dad's smacking mom around like she's in the boxing ring, and mom's calling all her friends to come over and kick dad's ass. I mean, you know how it goes. You've seen every one of these aspects. I just think I think if you have a family that has one parent, sometimes it's better than having two, is what I'm getting at. Sometimes
Absolutely.
It's better to only have one and have that third party external influence, like an uncle, like an aunt, like a best friend of the family,
There just has to
anybody.
be there has to be a third party that comes from somewhere, and I agree with you, but I also would add that it doesn't necessarily mean one parent's a criminal or a dirtball. Having one emotionally detached, emotionally immature, emotionally non-connected parent is, I think, from a psychological, again, I am not a shrink either. I just have a little thing that says also
I appreciate you saying it the politically correct way.
Is that can cause a lot more damage than just psychological trauma and damage. I think is more prevalent from a child growing up with an emotionally detached parent versus dad slinging dope so he can put food on the table.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're both on the same page when we say, a good influence, it's someone who's stable, someone who can bring a lot to the table, as in like little things like teaching them about money, teaching them about how to treat other people, being that person that shows by example and not just by words. Whereas like dad could be the greatest human being on the planet, but it all comes down at the end of the day is, are you willing to put your money where your mouth is? Are you willing to show what you're talking about and act the way that you're trying to get a kid to act? Because we both know if you try to teach a kid how to do something, but then you do something completely different, what is that kid going to do?
Well, if you're my kids, you get called out on it. Prime example, very benign type of thing is I don't ever wear a coat in the winter. I hate coats. So my kids would be compliant up until a point, and I'll never forget. There are 2 different times, one with each of them. You have to put your coat on. It's cold outside, and look, you never wear a coat. And they were right.
And you know what,
I shut up about the coat.
Well, you're better than my parents, because my parents would be like, do as I say, not as I do.
Correct. And we know how I feel about that phrase.
Yes. And that's 99% of what happens is like, listen, I told you to do something, do it because I told you.
And I literally was like, well, damn, they just called me out. And you got to give some kudos for that. So it just meant put a warm enough hoodie on when you go outside now.
Well, I mean, when you're a kid, if you're not questioning, you're not learning. In my opinion, if you're not questioning, you're not learning. Now, I'm not just saying question to be a pain in the ass, but like your mother, your father goes, listen, when you go outside, I need you to make sure you lock the door behind you when you leave, blah, blah, blah. Well, why? Well, because we don't want someone coming in and robbing us for all our shit.
But I think those
like
are fair
5-year-old kid's like a
questions.
5-year-old kid doesn't know that.
But there are so many parents that will refuse to answer that question.
Like putting money in your wallet.
Like you just, you don't, and they'll look like that is an ultimate sign. They take it as an ultimate sign of disrespect. And me personally, if my kids aren't talking, questioning, and asking and inquiring, then I look at that more disrespectfully than them saying, well, why? Because they have to be fully formed people. You don't want robots walking around, 10 years from now, just doing things because that's what we do. Because look how well that's worked out.
Well, like little things like, Dad, why do you put all the money in your wallet, but why do you put it all facing the same way when you put it in your wallet? There's no like real reason to that. It's just the way you prefer to do it.
Because I'm an OCD nut job. I mean, that's my answer.
But I mean, like, that's how you learn. That's how we learn a lot of the things that we learn as a young child, because we've talked about it before. As a child, like as a small child, we're all tactile. We're through our senses. We don't have, our brains are soft. They're not, we're not thinking logically. We haven't even learned that we're thinking yet. We're just globs of clay being shaped. So, I think it's very healthy for kids to ask questions and ask as many questions as they can to learn as much as they can so that they come out being more understanding of how the world works. Like with my nephew, he needed to borrow money because his dad's a shitbag, and he was using this kid's money to pay off his car insurance. He bought a brand new truck and blah 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 blah, all this shit. So my nephew's like, I can't make this payment, I can't make that payment, can you help me out? And I'm like, yeah, man, you're my family, I'll do whatever I can for you, but we're going to treat it like a loan. And he's like, okay. I'm like, yeah, we need to teach you fiscal responsibility. You're 17 years old. And when you turn 18, we all know you're not going to be living at home. You don't live at home now. He lives with his girlfriend. Doesn't live with his dad, doesn't live with his mom. But he loves them both. He gets along with them both. But, I'm like, you need to learn that, like, you have to put money aside. Like rules of the third rule. Like put 1/3 in the bank, put 1/3 for taxes, and 1/3 is what you pay every month. So, always make 3 times what you need. Like little things like that, a lot of parents won't think to tell their kids. They won't think to say, hey, they'll be like, they have common sense, they'll figure it out. That's a lot of it is like common sense, you'll figure it out because you're a smart kid. And that doesn't always work because I'm a smart kid and I'm a dumbass at the same time.
Well, there's lots of book smart people that don't have an ounce of common sense.
Oh, yeah, you work with a lot of them.
Well, and I'm kind of the opposite where, I've got more common sense than book smarts, and I'll take it that way because, you can learn most anything should you choose to. But I think that, and I saw something maybe on Instagram that said, I'm trying to remember the exact words, but your child isn't lying to you to be manipulative. They're just trying to learn. Like they don't realize that they're lying. They're not trying to it could be an exaggeration. It could be an omission, or sometimes it's just a way to get more information. No, that doesn't mean people should lie. But, sometimes I've seen it happen. I've watched it play out with parents who bring their kids to court and they want to know what's going on. And so they'll ask a question. If they don't get an answer, they'll find a back way to get to the answer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that comes out through lying or missteps or misspeaks. And I think that that's something that I see day to day where, in my opinion, if you had more dads sitting down on the floor having tea parties with their daughters and more moms out in the backyard throwing a football with their sons, I'd have a lot less clients.
Yeah, you said something on the last one that, I am by no means tooting my own horn, but like I've made a lot of changes in my life, right? And trying to reconnect with my nephew, you were like, you may have saved him from being my client. And I afterwards, I'm thinking about that. Like I watched the episode afterwards and put it together and, to put it out. And I'm just sitting there like, I don't think he's that kid. Like, but you don't know. Because I was the softest, quietest kid growing up and kind of an asshole now, and like this kid, like I said, I don't talk to 2 of them. I don't talk to his sister. I don't talk to his brothers. But like over the last couple months, I've learned a lot of things that I don't like. Like I will never talk about my sister's specifics, but let's put it this way. Her husband was very abusive in several ways, is a narcissist. I think he might be a sociopath. The guy's a fucking nut job. But like these kids have been put through the ringer since the divorce. Like he has turned 3 of the 4 kids against my sister by just telling blatant lies and manipulating them because, they still either lived with him or have their things there or whatever. Because when they split up, my sister went this way, he went that way, but like all his kids are being put through this bullshit where he's telling them flat out lies about everything that could possibly be more fake and more bullshit in order to keep them on his side. As much as, like I said, charging my nephew like $800 a month for car insurance. Nobody pays $800 a month for car insurance unless you have like 10 cars. Like, he was paying his father's car insurance so he could buy a new fucking truck.
See, and I have a
to
real
me, that drives
problem.
me nuts.
I agree. I don't think, I said this about being a prosecutor. I've said it many times about being a cop. Parenting is not a power trip. Your children are not your possessions, nor are they your pawns. They are not, your goal as a parent isn't to drive a wedge between your co-parent and any of the children because you want them on your side. Grow up. Be an adult. That is not their responsibility. They are not their parents' pawns. They should never be used again, and they are constantly. A child should never be used against another parent. They should never be manipulated. I hear this from people all the time. I was just talking to a friend of mine last night who was telling me a story about a family member of hers where, got divorced. Kids lived with mom at 15 and 17. Dad moved to, I don't know, somewhere fancy. Gets remarried. Kids go down because they spent the summers with dad. Dad feeds them full of all this stuff and buys them stuff and whatnot. And now we're in court in family division because the kids were filled with all this stuff that they don't want to go back with mom. They want to stay with dad. And that's just not, it hashed out, but it had to go to trial from what my friend told me. It had to go to trial. These kids had to go and talk about, and be cross-examined by someone like me who's like, well, did your dad promise you X and tell you Y and then sit there while they're being told you were lied to by your parent?
And I mean, I think it's such a cowardly thing to do. Like you said, the divorce is the parents' bullshit, right? It's their inability to make shit work for whatever reason. It has nothing to do with the kids. Unless your kid's a psychopath and he killed 9 people, then maybe he has something to do with it. But
shy of that.
In general, like, the kids don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, all they see is mom and dad fighting. You don't know what the background is. You don't know what all the details are. So you're stuck in the mud, just sitting there clueless about what's going on. You just know that mom and dad aren't getting along, and then mom and dad are divorced, and then now mom and dad don't live together. And I think that in itself is very traumatic. But when you take the kids and you weaponize the kids, you weaponize the kids against one parent. Thank God my sister is a great human being in that she has never once badmouthed her ex-husband. Not once. And to me, she will, because I'm her brother.
Right.
And
she should, and that should be where, and I can say the same thing. My husband never badmouthed his ex-wife. I have other friends that, to the kids, obviously to your significant other, your friends, you should be able to talk to them about, and unload and vent to them about whoever. But like you said, when you make the conscious choice to weaponize children, I think there is nothing that makes you a more pathetic and despicable human.
I mean, this guy has done so much. Like, he said my sister cheated on him, that he doesn't want his kid, she doesn't want her kids, that she did this and she did that. And like, meanwhile, this was a guy that was doing stuff he shouldn't have done during a marriage. Like I said, very abusive. Let's put it this way. It was so bad at times where even when I was a cop, I would tell my sister, like, I'm coming up there and I'm setting this guy straight. Like, he needs to know that he can't keep doing this shit to you. And she was always like, no. Once again, protecting the kids. She wanted the kids to have a father. And honestly, those kids would have been so much better if he was gone. Because we were talking about a good role model, a stable role model. This guy is the farthest thing from stable. He's like a table with a missing leg, He's all over the place, and he's horrible with money. All the things that you can think of that can make a relationship go bad. Horrible with money, mistreats the female, lies to the kids, does this, does that. Like, he's just a bad person. He's a bad human being, and like, my nephew's graduating this year, and I think it's next year. He graduates, and it's this year. He's graduating, and it's at Pitt. And my sister was wants to know, she's talking to my girlfriend, so I know what she said. She's worried that I'm going to do something because he'll be there. The ex-husband will be there. And I will never do anything to this man. I mean, it doesn't serve any purpose. But unfortunately, somebody needs to say to this guy that you just can't keep treating people like this, because what you're doing is you're damaging your children. Even at 24 years old.
But he clearly doesn't care.
I know, but like, I can't understand.
And people could tell him that till he's blue in the face. Somebody, I'm sure, already has.
I can't understand it. Like, nobody does, because he surrounds himself with shitheads like himself.
But even if he didn't, the basic narcissistic personality is never going to be able to literally comprehend that they're doing anything wrong. And if you said to me, Natalie, I just watched your interactions with your daughters and you are emotionally damaging your daughters, there is nothing that would gut me faster. Mm-hmm. But that personality type doesn't have that emotional wherewithal, and it doesn't mean anything because
it's all about self-preservation.
And they're just possessions to him.
And I mean, it's crazy. Like, they had this truck they got to sell, and, they have to sign, she has to sign it. It's both their names. She has to sign off on it at the notary. The notary's like an hour away from where she lives. And he's like, find a ride. Like, it's like, dude, like, my sister's hurt. She's been off work for 21 months with an injury where she needs some serious surgery. And he's like, you got to come up here and meet me to do this. It's like, bro, like, so now her 17-year-old nephew's going to have to drive her up there to do this just so he can sell this thing and keep the money and not give her anything for it because he's a piece of shit. Like, it's just so one-sided.
But that's the only way they know how to operate.
Yeah, and like I said, it infuriates me because my nephew, the one that I talk to, is such a great kid. Like, he's got everything. He's well-spoken, he's smart, he knows when to do this, he knows when not to do this. Like, he's got a very good head on his shoulders. And he's just now starting to come to the realization that things didn't go down the way that he said they did.
And that's a whole boatload of trauma that's waiting in the wings to.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't live with his dad. He was living with his dad, doesn't live with his dad now because he just doesn't want to hear the bullshit. And, we had to go over there for Christmas, and that was different. I mean, it's tough for them because it's just the trauma that comes with a divorce is so ninja-like.
Well, and I will say,
it's not always blatant trauma.
And everybody says that the younger generations, and you and I have gone on and on about this, but screens, devices, electronics have stopped them from being able to be kids.
Yeah.
But so has this shit. Because a kid can't be a 6, 15, 17-year-old kid if the adult responsible for them is using them as a chess piece.
Yeah,
that's what's stopping them from being able to be kids.
It's so ridiculous that, thank God I had a good stepfather, because when they got divorced, I was 17, and my mom tried to turn me against my stepdad. My stepdad never once tried to turn me against my mom. She did that on her own, but we always used to joke around, my stepbrother and I, when we still talked, is like, we were like rubber balls. You put pressure on us and we just bounced out. Mm. We just said, you know what, I don't need this shit. So, yeah. I'll get back to you later. But unfortunately, my sister's such a nice human being, and she got stuck in the middle because she was still living with one of the parents. I was already gone at college. My brother was gone at college. My stepbrother was gone at college. So we weren't directly involved in the day-to-day bullshit. And my sister was, and she was like the peacekeeper. So over time, it beat her up so much that, I think it affected her long term. I think it affected her emotional state of mind, and it affected how she looked at the world. And, I love her to death, but, it's sad to see what they did to her and how they made her feel. And then I'm the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I'm like, you can go fuck yourself. Like, I don't care.
Like you said, she was the peacekeeper, and look at, you're saying to her, hey, I'm going to come up and have a word with, no, and still trying to be the peacekeeper to her own damage and detriment. I mean, it speaks highly of her, but it's a very difficult and exhausting place for her to be.
Yeah. I mean, in talking to my nephew, I'm like, listen, man, don't do what I did. Don't turn to booze to fucking solve your problems. Like, you got to deal with this like a man, face it head on, because if you don't, you're going to be like me. And I don't want him to be like me. You know, I mean,
We
there's
want the
part.
people we love to be better than us.
I want him to be better than he's got the potential to be better than all of us. Like literally, this kid can do anything. You know, at 17 years old, he's doing concrete finishing and working a second job, and he's like trying to figure out he wants to be a police officer. I keep trying to talk him out of it, but he doesn't fucking listen. But like, he's got a good heart, a good soul, and a good mind. And you know,
That's a rare trifecta.
what I worry about is that the stuff that he's had to deal with over the last 4 years will come back to haunt him at the worst time. Because right now it might not seem like a problem. You know, he may be having thoughts and issues related to the divorce and the whole relationship, but it doesn't necessarily affect you right now. Like for me, that shit came up years and years and years later. Like 49 years old is when I started really feeling all the side effects. Now, granted, there's something wrong with me the whole time, but I wasn't aware of what it was that was fucking me up for so long. And I'm worried that the same thing's going to happen to him because, you know, he says, you know, last time I saw him, he was like, you know, I broke down with my girlfriend. And I'm like, good. Do that. Like, thank God you have someone to talk to. Thank God you're willing to tell her what's going on and willing to share what's going on. Because if you do what I did, if you hold everything in, then you got to find another way to deal with it. And that may be alcohol or drugs or violence or whatever, you know. So like, I really worry that it's going to affect him down the road. So I'm trying to do what I can in any way, shape, or form to be his friend.
Well, and I think that that's the most important thing you can do because what you basically need to give him is the coping skills that you didn't have that you found in the bottom of the bottle. And it may, if he has those skills, if he is and continues to be the type of person that you've described, and he has clearly, if he's able to break down like that with a friend, a girlfriend, whomever, more attention seeking is the fact that it was his girlfriend and he wasn't trying to hide that from her. He wasn't putting up the typical male wall. That these things, instead of damaging him, can make him all the better. And they're parts of him, but they can build strength if he continues to have people around him like you that are like, hey, it's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to let it all coexist together. And it can all make him even more incredible.
And Christmas, when we went up there, Shelly went with me, and I was really impressed by him because we were sitting there talking, and you know when a kid's not listening to you.
It's not subtle.
They're on their phone. They're doing this or doing that. Like he engaged in a serious conversation about like his mental health. Like I'm like, hey, how are you dealing? How are you doing with all this shit? Like, what can I do? What's working for you? What's not working for you? Are you talking about it?
That's impressive.
And he's sitting there like, you know, I have to tell you, don't make fun of me, but I broke down and this and that. And he's like, I've been having headaches from this. And I'm like, well, go to the fucking doctor. You know, he's like, I'm feeling better now. You know, I'm starting to see that what dad is telling me isn't true. And like to have that self-realization at 17, like at 17, I was still throwing down 40 ounces of Crazy Horse and going nuts on the weekends. You know, like he's working. Like I wanted to play video games with him last night. Like we were friends on PlayStation 5 so we can play Call of Duty. And I want to play video games with him last night. It's like 9 o'clock. He's like, I got to go to bed. I got to be at work at 6:30. I got to get up at 5:30. I was like, yeah, buddy. Like you're putting your fucking shit first. Like you're doing the right things for someone who hasn't been shown what the right things are.
And if that's what's inherent in him, that's a good starting point.
Yeah. So bringing this all around to what we started talking about, family dynamics and traumas. You know, a lot of the stuff we talk about today is common sense. You know, it really is common sense. But you got to sit down and think about it. You got to sit down and realize what the hell's going on. Like now that you've looked back on it, all the things, is there anything you would have done differently with your stepkids? And like I said, once again, if it's too much, don't answer it. You know, this is not about pushing you.
I'm sure that there are things that I should have done differently. I'm sure that there are things that I could have done differently. I don't know if I would. I'm not saying that I wouldn't. I don't know. And one of the things, because a big premise for me in my life is no regrets and things happen for a reason and those things you're to learn from. So I don't know And that probably is a terrible thing to say based on how things ended or ended up being. I don't know if I would do anything differently.
Well, in a true Dr. Phil moment, it's not all your fault. You know that, right? Like it takes two. It takes
two.
Takes everybody to fuck shit up. It takes everybody to make it work. You know, so no regrets, no like second guessing. That's really cool though. Like that's really awesome that you don't, because I have so many regrets about stuff that I've done, and you're just like, move forward.
Because I let it destroy me for a long time. So I'm just kind of out the other end of it.
Yeah.
And that was no good to anybody. And it wasn't going to change what happened. It wasn't going to change how things went. It wasn't going to change that I thought I was loved in places where I wasn't. All it was going to do is have that continue to cycle through and remind me, yeah, you thought you were loved, but you weren't. Yeah, you thought you were loved, but you weren't. Over and over on loop. There's nothing positive there.
Well, as we always do, coming to the end of this, I think this has been a really cool conversation. I mean, I kind of went off on my nephew a little bit because I'm so proud of the kid right now, and I hate his dad. But
Subtle.
yeah, I mean, he's just a bad person,
And you can't fix that either.
Super bad person. If you meet somebody down the road, or if someone's watching this that's either going through a divorce as a kid or a parent, or has step siblings, or any of these really bad situations that you end up in, I think the biggest thing, and you can tell me, is that you got to talk about it.
Yes.
You got to get it out on the table. You got to talk to somebody. You got to let them know how you feel.
Somewhere. So it doesn't necessarily have to be someone involved. Phone a friend. But I think that the more it stays in there and it's not coming out, the internalization is what causes the destruction.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. It's if you don't deal with it, it doesn't go away.
Right.
I think I've said this before. Like, there's a saying: a burden. What do they say? A burden untold is a burden doubled. So if you're not, shit just gets worse. I mean, it always gets worse. So, if you're out there and you're a kid in a marriage, a family dynamic, like a step sibling situation or step parents, just remember that it's just as hard on them as it is on you, and to be open, have an open mind about it, and give everybody a chance as long as they deserve it. If they're doing bad shit, then they don't deserve a chance, and you need to tell somebody.
And be gracious and be understanding.
Yeah.
And if there are people, this was a big problem for me because I'm a push awayer. When I need something, or I need support, or I need to lean, or I just push people away, just go full bore the other way and underground. And my therapist actually said to me, he's like, you have people around you that care about you. Why are you so stuck in your own head that you're going to deny them the privilege of being your friend and caring about you, when if it was done to you, you'd be royally pissed off? And I'm like, well, but it's different. He's like, no, it's not.
That's funny that you bring it up, because that's true. Like, as a recovering addict and coming from, family, whatever, by me not letting somebody help me, that is basically denying them their ability to recover from whatever the fuck they're dealing with.
Yes, because a lot of times helping someone else is what heals their traumas.
Well, that's the big thing of the 12-step program, is you're working your way through all your bad stuff to get to the 12-step where you give back, where you do the service work, where you help the others that are struggling and suffering. That's the goal at the end of the day. I think that's the goal of being a good human being, is
to be a little selfless.
To be a lot selfless,
Let's start with a little for most people.
I'm just getting there. Like yesterday I was a total tyrant because I was dealing with this, trying to make this website, and I was getting all pissed off, and she kept asking me questions during a movie, and I'm over there on the couch working with her, and I'm like, just stop. And I start going, blah, blah, blah. And then she just, goes over to the other side of the couch and doesn't talk to me for like 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I'm a work in progress. I still get pissy. I still get manic about shit. I still get stuck in the moment.
Say it, and you could recognize her sign of retreat, not as meaning you just won that battle. That just meant you just lost the war.
Yeah, I just don't like feeling bad about things anymore. And like addiction, recovery, mental health, all these things that we deal with, those aren't the only things that we're going to deal with. Like the stress comes from every part of our lives. It comes from, you don't have to be an alcoholic, an addict, mentally ill to suffer. I mean,
Well, but
you can suffer from anything at any point in any time in your life. It's just the way to avoid suffering is to not let it get to the point where you have to deal with it on your own.
well, and I mean, I don't know where the world decided or we as humans decided that suffering is a bad thing. Suffering is a blessing denied to many. I mean, it's cliche and stupid, but what do you apply to coal to end up with a diamond?
Yeah, I mean,
If you have no stressors, no pressure, you have no character, you have a squid.
struggle builds strength, but like, just like everything else, I think you agree, there are stressors that you should not have to deal with.
Correct.
There are stressors that can do nothing but affect you negatively.
Correct.
Where those are the things that
But
we
you
have
can't
to deal with.
recognize them unless you acknowledge stressors in general.
Yes, and I think that's one of the big problems with the generations that are coming up now is like stress is different for them.
Yeah.
Like stress for me was like, oh shit, I'm 3 months behind on my car payment. I just got laid off. Like, how am I going to pay my bills? Stress now is like, oh shit, I have no internet service. I can't get on TikTok.
But, and as ridiculous as that sounds, and as ridiculous as I honestly think it is, it's not our right to say that doesn't stress them. I've learned this from my daughter. She's like, but you say that my opinions and feelings can't be wrong. It is a stressor for them, and it may, honestly, as ridiculous as it sounds to us, it may be that not having internet, not having TikTok, because this is how they interact with the world, may cause the same level of stress in them that being 3 months behind on a car payment caused us.
Well, I can't get around that. I can't hug that. Like, I just can't. Like, 75th place trophies, for showing up and stuff like that. Like, society in general has gotten soft.
But this is what we've created, and so
Yes,
this is what we have to deal with. We can't say it doesn't exist. We can't
Yes.
tell them, no, you don't feel stressed, because this is what the world has told them to be.
So coming back to being a good role model and being a good influence on somebody, like, how do you do that? Like, because me saying, listen, put your phone down, stop being an idiot, like, go play outside, go do this, go do that, like, that's going to put somebody in a traumatic situation. Like, if I go to my one nephew who's like a giant baby and go, listen, do this, do that, he's going to cry.
And
sit
you're going
there,
to traumatize
and I'm going to sit there like, dude, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. Like, you know what? I walked around my house with a gash in my head, blah, 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 when I was 12 years old, and I didn't do anything. I just went to the hospital, got it fixed. Like,
And we busted on our grandparents for walking 12 miles uphill in the snow with no shoes.
Both ways.
It's the equivalent generation by generation, and I've had to learn, like, because we go through the same thing in our house with the phones. I had to start with, put my phone down. And instead of barking, go outside and play, when I think they need to go outside and get fresh air, how about go outside with them?
Like, I hate having a phone. Like, I hate it.
Oh,
I hate it. Like, I mean,
if it wasn't my livelihood, I'd probably run it over.
if I never would have had the ability to go online on my phone, I wouldn't care about social media. I would have never started a podcast. Like, there's a lot of good to it. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of good to it. But I think the downside is, like, it's like everything else. You have to set limits. Like, we as adults have to set limits. Like, every time you get done with work, what's the first thing we do when we get in the car?
Check the phone.
Oh, did I get any text? Who liked my post today? And then what do you do after dinner? What do you do before you go to bed? Like, it's it.
Well, and maybe that'll be a whole separate episode.
Yeah, you got to
on
go.
Self-discipline.
Yeah, she's
and
got important shit to do today. But no, but just when it comes back to the family shit, just remember, any situation you're in, you got to be able to talk about it. And it doesn't have to be an adult. It could be your friend. Just talk. Just anybody. Write it down. Journal. Get it out, because if you write it down on paper, you get it out of your soul. At least it's down in paper, and you can use that later, and you can look at it later, and you can give it to your therapist later. But one of the biggest things I did in rehab was journal. I wrote like 180 pages of day-by-day bullshit, and it helped. So, if anything we said here helped you guys, let us know.
And don't forget, come up with mental illness something.
Yes,
Give us
what we call mental illness besides mental illness. Steel City Roundtable at gmail.com. You can watch us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, something else, Rumble. All those places we're on. So continue to follow us, and we're going to continue to try to bring you content. Please let us know what you think, and there's always a seat for you at the Steel City Roundtable. We love you guys, and we hope to see you soon.
Have a good week.